What's up guys, it's Kat. You ready to learn? Let's get into it. So we're gonna keep this ball rolling with this historical beefs because apparently that's where it's at. Today we have a brand new lineup of just bullshit all throughout history, because that's all history is sometimes, you know, just bullshit. And the first place we're gonna start is in fact Korea. I've actually started watching this show on Netflix called Teach You a Lesson. It's a K-drama. Could you call it a K-drama? Drama action? I don't think so, but it's a Korean TV show, and it's literally about this guy, this bureau that is like invented to deal with like school bullies and shit like that, and kids being treated unfairly and all that shit like that. And it is so good, and it's so deep. So we're going to talk about King Yeonjo of the Joseon dynasty. So Yeonjo ruled the dynasty from 1724 to 1776, and he had one son. He initially had two, his eldest, but he died. So when Prince Sado was born, everyone was like, oh my god, we have another son, gang gang. But the problem was Yeonjo and Sado had a fucked up relationship. You know how when you're playing The Sims 4 and you have like growing together or some shit like that, and you can see compatibility and it's like the two puzzle pieces? Their puzzle pieces are broken. Yeonjo would consistently criticize and publicly humiliate Sado all throughout the court each and every day. Why would you do that to your son and then appoint him regent and think shit was gonna be sweet? Here we have Sado's mom, Lady Hyegyeong. Her court records and memoirs actually give us a first-person like account of how Sado was acting. So she talks about increasingly violent episodes in which he would be verbally abusive to all those around him. He'd end up
killing people around the palace.
Right. And then even at certain points turning to sexual violence against some of the servants. Technical timeout though. But the actual reason as to why Sado acted the way that he did, we don't know. Political pressure, family dynamics, mental illness, manipulation, like it could be a whole laundry list of shit. We just don't know what it is. In 1762, Sado became involved in a rumor that had spread around the court saying that he had plans to harm his father and take the dynasty for himself. When Yeonjo heard of this, he told Sado,
calm your ass the fuck down. Like you're doing a lot. Now you got these rumors saying you're trying to kill me. You trying to kill me, bro? I'm your dad.
And he ended up telling Sado, look dude, just kill yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like this is a lot going on. I don't know how you're about to recover from this. I ain't got shit to do with this because you're trying to kill me.
I say just kill yourself.
But Sado was not about that life. He was not about that kind of life. Yeonjo, instead of just, I don't know, exiling him or something, he stripped Sado of all of his rights and titles as his son and put him into a wooden rice chest, sealed the rice chest, and just threw it somewhere. He remained in there alive for 8 days until eventually, obviously, he died in July of 1762. What the fuck? But we're not done. Yeah, no. There's more. After killing his son, he gave all of his titles back to his dead fucking corpse in that box, and then allowed his son to remain his heir. So after he died in 1776, Sado's son Jeonjo was allowed to become king. And Jeonjo had the worst responsibility possible because as soon as he became king, he had to restore his father's reputation, restore his grandfather's reputation. But he was just like, y'all was doing too much, a lot. Why is my dad in a rice chest? Now we're gonna go to China. Love it here. Empress Dowager Cixi and Emperor Guangxu. This is like an adoptive mother, nephew, adoptive son
battle.
Empress Cixi was one of the most powerful women in King China at this time. So when Guangxu became emperor in 1875, when he was only 4 years old, it did make sense that she was like a regent figure until he became of age. Everything was fine, but it was when Guangxu got older and he was like, okay, I'm ready to rule by myself, that Cixi was like, what are you talking about, rule by yourself? One of the main areas where they differed was that Guangxu really wanted to reform China and the Qing dynasty as a whole. The common people were watching the Qing dynasty go through all these military defeats and all these treaties that no one gave a single shit about, and they were just like, are we gonna change? And Guangxu was like, yeah, I do want to change. And in 1898, he launched the 100 Days Reform. The state was modernized, education was improved, and administration was entirely changed. The economy kept booming and booming and booming, and Guangxu was like, yeah, this is how I want it to be. But Cixi and her advisors were looking at him and being like, I don't know, this is too steady. Let me be clear though, Cixi was not against reform and not against modernizing the state of China, but the issue was how fast he was going about it. It was like, things were getting brand new, things were being done, and it was just like, okay, maybe we should do this a little bit slower so they can get used to it gradually. In September of 1898, Cixi and her gang was like, you know what? Autobots rolled out. The reform movement had completely collapsed and several reformers were ultimately executed. Guangxu was arrested basically and placed under house arrest on Yingtai Island, but he still remained the emperor and lived in the imperial palace over there. While he remained emperor, he was only a political figurehead, just the face on the poster, if you will. He had the title Emperor of China, but who made all the decisions now? Cixi. This is where it gets kind of weird though. Guangxu died in 1908. Rest in peace, king. But Cixi died the following day. Fuck is that about? On top of that, modern forensic research went through his shit. He had arsenic poisoning. Y'all think he was poisoned, and then Cixi got next. One of my absolute favorites is this one. Henry II and Thomas Becket. And it's only my favorite because, oh my god, plot twist. After plot twist. Let's take it back to the 12th century in 1154. At this time, Henry II was king and he had a bunch of territories under his belt, including England and some in France. He had a very good friend of his, Thomas Becket, we'll call him his bestie. They were so close that he had sent his children, Henry II's children, he had sent his children to live with the Beckets for certain periods of time. So, trust was there. When he became king, he needed people around him that he could trust. He understood that as king, you also have to answer to the church, but he wanted to make sure that the church knew, yes, I gotta answer to you, but you also gotta answer to me. I am your sovereign. In the midst of having this kind of mindset, he had already promoted Becket to be Lord Chancellor. So in 1162, he went ahead and made Thomas Becket the Archbishop of Canterbury, right? And he assumed that while he was the Archbishop, he would continue being his political ally.
No, he was not.
Becket completely resigned his post as Chancellor and began defending the fact that the church needs to be on its own. The royal family cannot interfere with the church. I don't give a fuck what you say. We are over here, you are over there. Completely opposite of what Henry wanted. The major issue that they could not come to terms on, because there were a bunch, but there were some that they really just like, oof, no, I cannot stand you, was the question of who punished clergymen when they were committed of crimes. Henry suggested that the king and royal courts and royal authority took precedence over it because they were men of cloth. However, the church said, these are my people, these are my boys, I need to handle this on my own without your opinion. Thus, it was a battle of jurisdiction, but at the same time, like, I get both sides because the church wants to be the church. It's just Jesus over here. It's not Jesus and then Henry the 18th, whatever the hell, right? It's not that. But at the same time, in having independence such as, it does push away the idea of royal authority in those courts, and I can kind of see that's how Henry was looking at it. Their consistent arguments on things like this and other things ultimately made Henry so upset that Becket began fearing for his life. He eventually fled England and lived in France in exile for a number of years because he was like, nah, he's tweaking the fuck out, I gotta go. In 1170, they did kind of have a fragile peace and they reconciled, and Becket was allowed to come back to England and continue being the Archbishop. But then as soon as he came back, he began excommunicating bishops who were involved in the coronation of Henry's son.
What did he say fuck me for?
Which obviously would piss off anybody, because fuck you doing all that for? With the back and forth between Henry and Becket, it's probably easy to say that the king probably did go on rants. You know how when you're mad, you just rant about stuff to air? You ain't talking to nobody, but you're letting all your frustration out verbally? It does not surprise me if he did not do that. And because he did that, 4 knights, right, who I can only assume were walking around the palace and hearing him talk about how much he can't stand Becket and he wants him to be over and done with. They're probably thinking in their minds, you know, damn, he really hates this man. Like, you gotta get this boy up out of here. And then one day, Henry decides to say, who will rid me of this troublesome priest? The only way I'm envisioning this is like the Ninja Turtles, but like from hell, because what the fuck? They took his anger and frustration as opportunity probably to get some more coin, maybe some land, maybe some coochie. I can't tell you what they thought they were gonna get. They went to Canterbury Cathedral on December 29th, 1170 and jumped this man. Jumped his ass. Like, killed him on the steps in the cathedral where he stood. They did that shit and said, oh yeah, Henry's gonna love us. You are stupid. I don't know why they thought killing that man in the cathedral would end all these years of back and forth turmoil and strife. They made that man a martyr and canonized him 2 years later. What the f? And because of this, the church gained even more power and Henry was sat there like, oh my fucking god. Have you ever heard of the kingdom of Dahomey? If you have, you're super cool. Dahomey was a West African kingdom that is now present-day southern part of Benin? Benin? I think it's Benin. So this was a beef between brother and sister. King Akaba ruled over Dahomey from 1685 to 1760, but he had a twin sister, Princess Hangmi, but they also had a younger brother named Prince Agaja. So in 1716 is where stuff gets kind of messy. King Akaba dies, but his son, Agbosasa, is too young to take the throne. So Hangmi steps in and rules as a regent leader figure. And this is where I got kind of confused, because it's not clear whether Hangmi was like regent ruler or whatever the fuck for 3 months or 3 years. And I feel like why are we not sure? While she was regent, Hangmi was not just sitting at home with the babies talking about some uno dos tres. No, we're not doing any of that. She put on the armor of her twin brother and continued on his military campaign. He was going throughout the Uweme River region, I hope I'm saying that right, and in the midst of this was actually when he died. It's not clear how he died, but some folks were saying it was an injury from battle, others were saying it was poison. A lot of later traditions often say that Hangmi is responsible while on his military campaigns for forming the all-female military troops, but like it's not 100% clear, but a lot of them do point to her being as the owner. Now in 1718, what the hell? Agaja pulls up and he's just like, you know what? And he starts saying that he needs to be the one on the throne. We ain't got time to wait for Agbosasa. We have no time. And then a succession war ensued, and guess who won? Agaja. My god. With him winning the war against Hangmi and her nephew, he did end up being crowned in 1718. Even though he did win the succession war, that did not mean there were other claimants that were still not going to be up his ass. So to eliminate all possibilities of anybody else rising up, Agaja decided to kill Hangmi's son so he could never grow up and be like, well, hey, I got a claim too.
No, you don't.
Agbosasa ended up fleeing north to escape persecution, I'm sure. And Hangmi was completely removed of power. Even though this is his entire sister, he completely removed her of power. There is a version of an oral tradition that says when Hangmi was removed, she completely renounced Dahomey as a whole and in fact cursed the goddamn place. The Europeans would come and get it. God damn. However, this is just from an oral tradition. I don't know if it's facts or not. All I know is, as a crazy thing to curse your hometown girl, what? Wasn't that interesting? I think that was really interesting. I had a great time. That is all that I have for you guys today. Let me know what your favorite part was. I think I'm gonna go with the Dahomey story, because wow, you already won. Why is my son dead? Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!